when my corporation bought the land adjacent to our house, the seller moved the east line about 300 yards to the west and cut off 6 acres. And recently he has tried to take the 6 acres because he claims he's occupied it for 15 years. Well, you know in Michigan that you could be subject to a non-jury trial where you're not allowed to testify. I mean, this is something straight out of Stalin in 1938. Okay. And there is a Tea Party guy, Greg Garninger, in Midland, who's been working on this problem. And yeah, non-jury trials by the judge apparently are common in Michigan. And I think our federal constitution guarantees us the right to a jury trial, but not in Michigan, okay, under many circumstances. So when the people up in Lansing say, hey, everything's hunky-dory, don't believe them. And also I will remind you on 1 October, all your internet purchases, you will have to pay sales tax on. Yep, I'm writing it down right now. And I've cynically concluded that the government can do 2 things well: collect and spend money, and kill. Okay? And I think the government ought to have more interest in that. Now, how do we solve all these problems? We have to get the best people available into government. Okay? And that doesn't mean accepting what comes forward out of the bushes. Okay? We should be going to people that we respect and saying, why don't you run for public office? We need you. Okay? Now, I tried that with Neil Armstrong. Okay, one day at lunch, after John Glenn announced, I said, Neil, why don't you run for office? He says, well, I don't want to get down in the mud and wrestle with the pigs. And then he said, Jerry Springer was mayor. He says, well, I'd be like Jerry. He says, when you make a hell of a lot of noise like a big bass drum and you open it up, and there's nothing there. So how do we get good people to run for office? You probably read in the newspaper in the last week or two that our new president at the U of M has just returned from a very successful trip in China, where he signed all kinds of new agreements. Okay. Why are we doing that? 5,000 of the students at the University of Michigan are foreign. 3,000 from China. Can't we take care of Michigan kids? And oh, by the way, I mean, it's not the 6 Dems on the Board of Regents. I mean, we've tried our own, like Dan Horning, Rob Steele, Ron Weiser. Do you think they're going to get up there and say, hey, we want to feature American kids? Probably not, okay? So, you know, we can't even get good candidates to run for regent. And oh, by the way, do you know in America 65% of the students in graduate school are foreigners? 50% of the undergraduates at our colleges are foreigners? Why are we doing this? How many of our workers are Mexican? Mr. Trump, he's going to send $12 million on the back, right? So what's this love affair that we have of taking care of everybody else and not our own? Okay. Now, just to give you some heartburn, all right. Well, Dan already mentioned 2 of our own who got caught doing things that they shouldn't have. But Gary Glenn is still up there doing good things, as far as I know. Okay, perhaps one of the few. But then we have Gretchen Driscoll, Pam Burns, Debbie Dingell, Tim Walberg, all right? But then maybe Justin Amash is a good guy, okay? All right. Then we have Mark Boomstra. Local boy makes good, gets on the Court of Appeals. And what did Mark Boomstra do about 6 weeks ago? He ruled that the ballot issue that 75% of the people voted on to protect the wolf wasn't valid because people can't vote on ballot initiatives. This is what he thinks of democracy. And remember, his wife was all tangled up in the pedophile affair at the University of Michigan Hospital. Okay. All right, then we have Warren Evans and Bob Ficano, right? You know, just down the road. And then we have Hillary. That ought to make you sick. All right? I mean, consider the alternatives to Donald Trump. Hillary? No way. Okay? Maybe Trump's not perfect, but he says he can do business with Putin. All right? That sounds good. All right? He's going to build a wall. All right? And a few other things. All right? So maybe we can at least start the cleanup process. Okay? So there's probably more problems than we can deal with. Okay? But we have to start somewhere. Okay? And if we don't, I think there's going to be dire consequences. Okay? Things can get worse. And when I look at Russia for the 21st century, Russia is a huge nation, biggest land area on Earth. The Chinese also know this. Okay? They have enormous amounts of water, all the elements on the periodic table, a highly educated population. Okay? And when we look at them, I think we really ought to be their allies. And by Obama doing what he is right now, he's forcing them to ally with China. We don't want that. Okay? And when the general, the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a Marine, is asked what's the biggest threat facing the United States, he said Russia. Apparently he doesn't look the other way across the Pacific and see what the Chinese are doing. Although Dan said maybe it's a